All right, this is The Boss's Office, Episode 9, The Lost Art of Recruiting. All right, I'm going to say something that might make business owners uncomfortable. Everybody says nobody wants to work anymore, and I'm not sure that I buy it. Maybe people still want to work. Maybe companies just forgot how to recruit. Because let's be honest, throwing a job post online and hoping for the best isn't recruiting. Today, we've got Tom and Amanda from Solution Harbor in studio, and we're talking hiring, recruiting, culture, red flags, bad hires, and whether recruiting has become a lost art. So welcome back to The Boss's Office, where we talk business, leadership, entrepreneurship, and the lessons nobody teaches you until you're living them. I'm Randy Vance.
And I'm Rocky Dunn.
Yes, you are. And today we've got Tom and Amanda from Solution Harbor joining us. You guys, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thank you.
So before we start diving into recruiting, would love to hear your guys' origin story.
Yeah. So I got into recruiting right after college, really. And I worked for a really large national recruitment firm. And then I spent some time at a specialty boutique firm. And I really loved recruiting. I thought it was super exciting how many different people I got to interact with every day, how I could help companies hire the right people. I could help people get into the right jobs. But I saw a lot of practices in the recruiting industry that I thought were really uncouth. I thought that recruiters were after fees and not necessarily what was best for the companies or candidates that they represented. And I saw it over and over and over and over. And so I sort of knew that long term, if I wanted to stay in this industry and be able to sleep at night and do the right thing for my companies that I represent, the candidates that I represent, that I would need to go out on my own.
Love it.
So 2010, I started Solution Harbor with the intention of working alone. And then several years later, met Tom, and we decided to join forces, and that's worked out really well for the past several years.
Tom, did you see yourself as a recruiter?
That was not something I ever aspired to be before meeting Amanda and finding out about the recruitment industry. My first career was in education, and I had a great run and enjoyed every aspect of it, but felt like I wanted something different out of life. And I actually made a list of criteria of what my next career could look like. And it just so turns out that recruiting checked a lot of those boxes. Amanda and I are not only business partners, we're also married.
So she recruited you.
She recruited me to be a recruiter. And I had been doing some recruiting at my last job in education, hiring big teams of educators. And so I had some exposure to what it looked like internally.
So you didn't necessarily grow up wanting to be a recruiter?
I mean, I grew up with an uncle that was in executive search, and so I knew what that was from a young age. And then when I was in college, I had some friends that once they graduated got into the recruiting space and really thought that I would be good at it. And so they recruited me into recruiting. So, you know, I considered a couple different careers, but I very thoughtfully pursued a career in recruiting, which is not typical. A lot of recruiters will get into recruiting for an industry that they work in. So like, for example, accountants. People work as an accountant for a company and get burned out on month-end close and the pressures that come with being an accountant, but they get phone calls from recruiters all the time and go, that seems like that would be more fun than closing the books every month. And so people will fall into recruiting from their particular industry, but I actively pursued it as a career.
So real quick, help me out. What's the difference between staffing and recruiting?
So staffing is typically more low level, high volume. It's often temp. So like my first job, I worked for a big staffing agency. Most of the work that we did was temp or temp to hire. We did a lot of work in manufacturing roles, administrative roles. And so it's really a volume situation. When a company is like, oh my gosh, we have someone who just had an accident and can't come into work today, but they're a vital part of our office. We need someone tomorrow. You need to call a staffing agency that has a book of active candidates that they're working with that could come into your office tomorrow. Recruiting, executive search, like what Tom and I do, is more focused on, we meet with a company, we find out what their specific and difficult, often hiring need is, and then we go out and survey the land and figure out who exists in this space. We try to speak to as many of those people as we can and help the company identify the right people to work with them and then go from there. So it's a much more targeted search for hard to find positions. The pay structure is, the way that companies pay for our fees are different, where in temporary staffing, it's like an hourly rate that you pay the staffing firm and then they pay payroll to the employee. In our business, we take a percentage of the first year salary of an employee that we place.
Got it.
All right, quick break to our sponsor, Boss Mortgage. At Boss Mortgage, we believe in getting a home loan should not feel like surviving an IRS audit. We're an independent mortgage bank serving Oregon, Washington, Idaho, California, Arizona, Montana, and Colorado. We offer the flexibility of a lender with pricing that competes like a broker. And if you're buying, refinancing, or just trying to figure out your options, we've got your back. NMLS 2547821, equal housing lender. Okay, now back to the show. You said something that I want to go back to. Now, the Boss's Office is really it's a show for entrepreneurs and high-level executives. And you saw a problem and you knew you could do better. And so you ventured out on your own. What was that like? Was it terrifying?
Yes.
I'm just going to give you one big, broad, open question there. Like, think back to 2010 when you had enough frustration with how the industry was, because it's very similar to how we started Boss Mortgage, right? Tell me about that, and I don't know, maybe some things that that you hadn't expected in owning your own company.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in 2010, I was sort of at a crossroads in where I was working and what my next kind of options were. I was being heavily recruited by some other recruiting friends that wanted me to come work at their big agencies. And I was considering that, they were offering like really beautiful package salaries and, cushy benefits that come with working with a large company. But it also came with like excruciating hours and like excruciating pressure to close more deals, make more placements, which is what I was kind of trying to get away from. And I remember I was like in the parking lot of the office that I was working for, and I was like kind of frantic. And I called my father, who was an entrepreneur. He was a general contractor for his career. And I kind of told him a bit what was going on. And he said, don't you only take home half of what you make, which most recruiting firms, you take home 50% of whatever you earn. And I said, yes. And he goes, so even if you only do half the work, you're going to make the same amount of money if you do this on your own. And I went, you're right. But, I was pretty young. It was 2010, which was not the best time to be starting a recruiting firm. I additionally went and met up with a client of mine who I'd done a lot of work with, and I told her my predicament, and she knew all these agencies that were trying to recruit me. She grabbed my arm hard. She was this little thing. She grabbed my arm hard and almost like shook me and said, Amanda, you'd be wasting your talents to go work for someone else. Like, go out on your own. And I took a couple of weeks to really like plan. I talked to an attorney. I got all my contracts and everything in order. I went down. I was living in San Diego at the time. I drove down to get my business license. You had to go in person back then. I don't know if you have to now. On my drive home, that old client, called me and said, I have your first piece of business for you. And it ended up being project work that was supposed to last for 3 months. It lasted 3 years. And it was essentially like getting a base salary, and it was part-time. So I was able to use that, really start my business. I don't really believe in luck. I think we build our fortune. And I think that I was fortunate that I did really good work with this woman, and she connected me to this incredible opportunity just right out of the gates. But it was scary, even still, recruiting is very up and down. It's seasonally up and down. It changes year to year with whatever's going on in the economy. There are dry months and it's brutal. Like, it's really painful. So the things that I have done to make myself comfortable, happy, and content with being an entrepreneur and having these unknowns of not knowing what month to month will look like is things like not having debt, really living within my means in a way that I still enjoy life very much, but being really conscientious about that. I also discovered that I am terrible at things like accounting. I am terrible at things like administrative work. So I outsource everything I can, or I get Tom to do it. We figure out where we each have strengths and work on those individual things. Tom's really good at marketing and, keeping up with LinkedIn and things like that. So really trying to focus on what I am good at. I'm a good recruiter. I'm good at business development and networking. So focusing on those things and everything else, give it to someone else.
Does that sound familiar?
That does sound familiar. Yeah. It's impressive that you figured it out. How quickly did you figure out, to stay away from the things that are not your strengths? Was it immediate that you were outsourcing, or did you have to learn the hard way and then choose to outsource?
It only took me a couple of months to realize I can't do the accounting, and wow, I tried to do payroll for myself on my own. That is not going to work. And it was pretty obvious to me pretty quickly. I need to focus on what I'm capable of. Otherwise, first of all, I'm going to be working all the time. And second of all, I'm going to mess it up. I was already messing up the accounting. Not good at that stuff. So.
I'm not good at that stuff either.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that, in mine and Rocky's relationship, we are not married.
No.
Just clarification. I mean, we kind of are in business. But, we found that Rocky is definitely better at spreadsheets. I don't know what he puts into there, but it's usually numbers and data. And I hate numbers and data. I love selling. I love marketing. I love being the face of the company. I am really good at originating mortgages. Not so great at the business stuff. So that's where Rocky comes in hand. I still don't know what he does on the spreadsheets, but
luck, a lot of luck.
They look pretty.
But it for a lot of people, that takes a while to get there, to get to the point. Sometimes they take too long to figure out what their strengths are, and they start trying to do everything. That's one of the things that we talk about quite a bit on the podcast is, when do you come to that conclusion? When do you set that, when do you identify these are my strengths, I need to focus on it? Taking time away from selling or recruiting is going to hurt your business, and you're doing something you don't enjoy. But so Tom, then what is your role then? And how did you step into that?
So I'm focused primarily on recruiting. I do some business development as well. One of my industries that I focus on is construction. So I'm, a member of a couple of trade organizations, and I get out and network and participate in that community. But a lot of it is just the hard work of recruiting, going out there, sourcing candidates, engaging them in whatever way I can. I do a lot of cold calling on people's commute time when they're driving home, talking to people, seeing if they're interested in pursuing new roles, all the vetting, interviews. We actually work a lot with our clients as well to augment their vetting and interview processes as well, because many of them come to us from a point of pain where they've made mistakes in the past. They want to, make better hiring choices. And so I'm working a lot with my clients as well to help them make good hiring choices.
Yeah, so being more intentional and being slower about hiring is, I think, something as a new business that we're learning. And it's funny you said there's actually a lot of parallels between recruiting and mortgage. Nobody wakes up one day saying, "I can't wait to get in the mortgage business."
Yeah.
Nobody.
We just kind of end up here.
You're right.
Right?
Yeah, you fall into this industry for some reason.
You do fall into this industry, but it can be a very lucrative career. It's not like a kid grows up saying, "I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a recruiter, I want to be a mortgage originator." And so it is amazing how many connections our two industries have. Now, question: have you ever recruited for the mortgage industry? Because I've got some horror stories. I get recruited, and so does Rocky, on a daily basis.
We really try to stay in our lanes. And so most of our clients are family owned or tightly held businesses, and they tend to do something tangible. So we do a lot in construction, manufacturing, food and beverage, agriculture. We've done some work in commercial real estate, but not so much in residential.
What is one thing right now that you guys in your business have realized is the hardest? What's the hardest aspect of your business? Is it the actual recruiting? Is it running the business?
So from like a time standpoint, it's a lot of what Tom does is like sourcing. So searching for the right people to contact and then getting a hold of them. That's really time consuming. It can be really frustrating when we know this opportunity that we're working on is a great opportunity. This candidate that we're calling, it would behoove them to at least have a conversation with us. So that part is hard, kind of just from you feel like you're beating your head against the wall a little bit. I think the part that gets down to like the most difficult from a human aspect is when you're at the end. So you've gone through all of that. You've helped your client understand how to interview, maybe in some cases taught them how to interview. Some of these CEOs that we work with, despite running, 80, 100, 150 employee companies, maybe someone else has been doing the recruiting, or like at this particular level, they've never done the interviewing. So your client's gone through the interviewing and now it's time to put the offer. They have a candidate, they want to move forward, they want to put the offer together. This is where the emotions get high for everyone involved. And so, the candidate, like you try to get them as clear as you can on what to expect in the offer, benefits, all of the things that come with a job. So that there's no surprises when the offer letter comes. There's always surprises every single time. The client gets.
Oh, that's not what we talked about. I thought you said I start with 4 weeks of vacation.
Yeah, and it's really time intensive. It's really emotional. It's when you're working with an entrepreneur or a family owned business, it's not just business. It's personal. It's their livelihood. It's their legacy. And so I think all of that like human management, it happens throughout the process, but when you're nearing the end, it's just it's intense. I'm going through it right now. I have a bit of an eye twitch. I don't know.
Doubling down on the coffee. I would love to hear some horror stories.
There's got to be.
You don't
good
have
ones.
to air this segment if you don't want to, but I would love to hear some. I would love to hear something where maybe either you got to the finish line or you completely miss the boat on a potential recruit and they ended up, burning the company down. Do you have anything like that?
I mean, here's one of my favorites. So when we go through the vetting process, there's these formal stages, right? We have different interviews. We run the references ourselves. We explain the references. This is exactly what this individual is going to be doing. Does this sound like a good fit for you? So we have this robust formal process, but there's a lot that can happen in between those formal stages. And we just pay attention to how is this person engaging the process. This isn't indicative of what their work product is going to be like. And so we were recruiting a sales guy for a building products company that also installed. So they're kind of somewhere between manufacturing and construction, or a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. And this gentleman kept asking about like, what's my sales budget going to be like? How much am I going to have to spend on client dinners and stuff like that? And it's an appropriate question for any sales guy to ask. Don't get me wrong, but it kept coming up again and again and like doubling down. And so I had been taking notes like, this is a little bit unusual. I haven't heard this from other candidates. And this gentleman was at the finish line. We always encourage our clients to do like an informal interview. We call it a social interview, where they go out to lunch, go out for a drink or coffee or whatever, just as a final check, just to see how they behave in the quote unquote real world. And so they went out to lunch, and the president, vice president of this company ordered like soup and salad or sandwich or whatever, like a moderate lunch order. And this guy ordered like a $70 lobster. And so we rounded up the wagons with our clients afterward, and we're like, hey, how did it go? And like, we feel pretty good about this guy, but he just ordered like the most expensive thing on the menu. And it's like, well, we've had this concern as well. And so it's interesting, and you have to pay attention to the very end with how candidates are holding themselves. But people do weird stuff.
I have to believe, like you guys, like having the recruiting process, your ratio of success in hiring is got to be stronger than just a company doing it on their own, right? Because of the background experience. So, like as a percentage, how successful, roughly, are you guys with?
I mean, there's different measures of success, and like once we place the person at the company, they're the ones really kind of tracking what's going on. So recruiters have what's called a replacement guarantee, and depending on the position, it may be as little as 3 months and maybe as much as 18 months. If it's like a CEO or a general manager, we'll do a longer guarantee. So what that means is if the employee, once they're hired, if they're fired or they quit within that time frame, then we have to go out and recruit a replacement for them at no additional charge. Do the work again for free. We don't want to do that for us or them or the candidate, you know? And so, I mean, honestly, I've been recruiting now, I think 24 years. It's happened a very small handful of times. And if you think about, you know, we place, I don't know, 10 or 15 people a year, and it's maybe happened 3 or 4 times in my entire career, it doesn't happen very often. And then when we do make placements, this company that Tom was just talking about, we placed, I don't know, maybe 15 people there they went through a fast growth and then unfortunately closed. Of those 15, everyone stayed at least a year, most stayed longer. There was one guy that they felt wasn't the best fit, and he still stayed for a year and a half and made some positive contributions. So many of our clients, when they come to us, say we've made a bad hire, or we keep making a bad hire and we don't know what we're doing wrong. And then they see the process that we have and they go, oh, we don't have a formal process. You really know how to look for some of these yellow flags that could be a red flag and so on.
So I really want to talk about the lost art of recruiting. In our industry, I get a text at least once a day. People do not do their research. So I'll get a text that says, oh, hey, Randall Vance, not knowing that I go by Randy, but my license is under Randall. You know, all of our numbers in mortgage and in real estate can be tracked, right? You can tell who's sort of the top producer, or who's, you know, what sort of volume that people are closing. And I will get text messages that will just be the most cut and paste, you know, from an auto dialer text that's just, hey, you know, would you like to talk about our, you know, our culture and our this, that, and the other thing? And it literally just text and phone calls. And then it'll be call center phone calls, you know, where you answer the phone, you don't recognize the number, and there's no real personal touch. Now, in our industry, there used to be a personal touch back before 2010, where people would get to know each other, and they'd send you a bottle of wine, or they'd, you know, they'd find out if you like fishing, or maybe your kids play soccer. They would find a way to make that connection with you. And now in our industry, it is literally just a numbers game. And I'll tell you, that's kind of why I decided to go out on my own. I've just had this for the last 9-10 years of just this impersonal approach. And so I got to think with having your operation that you take the time to get to know the candidate who you're recruiting. You obviously understand the job that you're recruiting for, but can you talk to us about sort of the art of recruiting? You know, how do you get to know someone? What are maybe some tips for companies that don't necessarily need your services but are looking to do recruiting of their own? Can you give us kind of some pointers on the art for recruiting?
Yeah. So the reaching out to prospective candidates, you mentioned like an auto dialer. I think there's a lot of big recruiting firms that are using those kinds of automation tools. They're using AI to craft their outgoing messages. Every candidate that Tom and I get on the phone, one of the first questions we ask is, why did you decide to have this conversation with me? Why did you talk, you know, how did you make this decision to talk to me?
Right.
And, you know, they'll often say something about, you know, I'm lacking growth at my job and this sounded like a great opportunity. But also they'll say, I could tell that you weren't AI. Your message was personal, and I could tell it was a human who had done some research and cared about me. So I think if you are a company and you're trying to recruit, especially really key employees, to focus on passive candidates. So you're not going to find those candidates just by posting an ad. Passive candidates they're working. They have their heads down. They're at their desk. So you've got to get out and join networking organizations. If you don't have time for that, scour LinkedIn a few times a week. if you're consistently hiring, I don't know, project engineers or, whatever the role is that you're hiring, spend 20, 30, 40 minutes 3 or 4 times a week on LinkedIn looking for people in your area that might be a good fit. If they are, reach out to them. If you're the CEO of a company and someone gets a message from you on LinkedIn, they'll probably have a conversation with you. So you always want to be recruiting. I think that's really important. And then as far as the process, get a process. If you have no idea how to do it, hire an outsourced HR person to help you create a process. You want to have multiple steps to your interview process. We think you should do different formats for each of those. So we'll often do a phone call and a video. We recommend to our clients that they do a video and a couple types of in-person, as well as the social interview that Tom mentioned, going out for lunch or dinner as the last step to see, is this person polite to the servers? Do I enjoy having a meal with them? Do they know how to eat properly? I mean, I heard about a candidate that took someone's steak bone off their plate and chewed on it. I've heard about people that were intoxicated at this kind of final interview. So having people show up in different formats, the workday is never the same, And so if you can see how they show up in different formats, you can really start to get a sense of who they are. Also, like Tom mentioned, pay attention to those things in between. Do they respond to emails quickly? Do they get back to you if you make a phone call? Do they send you a text that says something ridiculous like, hey, bro? Or is it, how are you doing today? Thank you for reaching out. All those little things in between, that's how someone works. Interviews are very, it's a show. It's theater, any candidate is going to practice. They're going to practice what questions they're going to get, the answers that they're going to give. Right. So the more you can shake that up and get them to actually show up as they are, the better. I would also say don't use formulaic interview questions. All the generic interview questions, they're not uncovering anything. You want to try to uncover, can this candidate do the job that we have? So asking situational questions about, this is a problem we're encountering. How would you handle it? Things like that. You can also ask some really great questions about, the person personally without getting into legal questions. So while you can't say, what church do you go to? You could say, what do you enjoy doing on the weekend? Again, you're going to work with this person every day. You better like and respect them. So maybe you have something in common that you can talk about. Also coming up with, we really like the question of what drives you, what motivates you, what are you most proud of in your life? What was the hardest thing you've done in your life? People really open up and share some pretty incredible things about themselves. People are amazing. So if you can find out what makes someone amazing,
and that's excellent advice. One of the things I think we lack, and probably most people have, that social interview. Just because you get somebody out of the office, you're not just interviewing by asking questions, because everyone comes prepared to answer, what are your 3 strengths? What are your 3 weaknesses? Tell me something, about yourself, that kind of stuff. But if you can't get face-to-face early on, you're just trying to decide if this person is a good candidate.
Just trying to break the glass.
Yeah.
Or the ice.
What can somebody do? Does Zoom work? Because I love the idea of finding somebody, like you were saying. That sounds silly, but do they respond? Do they eat properly? Can they behave themselves? Can they not show up drunk? How do you do that if you can't get face to face?
So I think part of it is the tone that you set going into the interview process. So you can only see so much through a camera. But in terms of tone, I think that maybe for a while there's this old school mentality where an interview is like an interrogation and we're grilling this candidate. I don't think that really works well today in most scenarios, unless maybe you're interviewing a trial attorney or something like that, someone who has to be really hard and under pressure. But if you approach it with a tone like, hey, I really want to help you make the best possible choice in your career. And that's really easy for us to do as a third-party recruitment resource, but you could even do it doing direct hire. Say, hey, I'd rather see you take a job somewhere else than take a job here if it's not the right fit for you. And set that tone that I'm here to help you and I'm going to be really transparent about the good, the bad, and the ugly here. And we like to say a relaxed candidate is a revealing candidate. If you set that tone, they're going to, respond in kind, and they're going to show you who they are as a person. And so, I think that can help bring people's guard down a little bit and help you get to know them regardless of whether you're right in front of them or talking over the phone or through a screen.
Also, I think it's so important to have small talk at the beginning of every single meeting. I've seen companies just dive right into the interview, and that's not a relaxed candidate. They're sitting up straight and they're going, okay, remember all of the answers that I prepared before I came here. So if you can have some small talk, you can see, are they comfortable? Are they cool? What is their personality? Because an interview is not revealing someone's personality. It's just not.
Right.
We start off every executive management meeting with a SEG, and I like to, especially if I'm doing business, having a SEG or a segue or small talk where we know why we're here. We know that we're going to talk business. We know that we're going to talk about the recruiting or the interview as why you're here. But yeah, getting to know someone and disarming them. And I think that's also a great sales technique.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, I mean, you're in sales, you're selling a position for a company, you're selling the company that you have the skills to fill that position. And so having that ability to be able to connect with someone on a real world level, I think that's great. I think that's great.
Are you going to share your question that you ask every single one? I would like their opinion on it.
Oh man, you're really putting me on the spot here, Rock. We're probably going to edit this out, so if it does make it, go easy on me, you guys. Okay, so I have been known to ask the question, do you know what your love languages are? Wow,
it's especially fun when you have
that was the response.
Wife guess, huh?
Yeah, do you know what yours are?
I don't even know if I know what all the options are.
You've got words of affirmation.
Yep.
You've got physical touch.
Mm-hmm.
You've got acts of service. There's two more.
Gifts.
You've got, giving and receiving gifts. What's the other one? Oh,
quality time. Quality time.
Quality time. I feel like knowing what those are tells so much about a person. Like, do you know your love languages?
Probably gifts and quality time.
Tom?
I would say physical touch and was it active service?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those ring true for me. I enjoy receiving those things, but also giving those things too.
I think, and where I was going with this, this is Randy's question, and we laugh about it quite a bit, but is it okay to throw out random questions like that? Like, I mean, I think he means it somewhat disarmingly, but also curiosity. Like, I want to learn. I know you might be really good at your role, and you show up on time, and you've had years of experience, but I want to just talk about who you are, and I think that's kind of where you go with that question.
Absolutely.
Is it okay in an interview to kind of go down like a personal road a little bit?
It is. We tend to encourage companies to stay away from these kind of like trick questions, like why are manholes round? Or if you were an animal, what would you be? To me, I mean, I think it really depends on the level of candidate, but I'm often dealing with general managers, CEOs, people that have 25 years of experience. And so I feel like asking a question like that can be almost insulting. So I think you need to be careful. The love languages one is fun. I think, if a candidate tells you my love language is physical touch, how does that apply to your job?
One never knows. I also love to. I'll tell you, I love to throw curveballs and get people off kilter, because when you get so focused and you're so rehearsed, and I can't stand a rehearsed interview.
Yeah,
I do not. I absolutely agree with you that having a list of questions, right? It just seems, honestly, it seems barbaric to me, and I want to get to know the person. I mean, the fact is, we saw their resume. We know that they can do a job. They can do the job or the task, or they can train to do the task because they have the skills. But, we've got to spend 40, 50 hours a week with this person. Are they going to fit our culture?
Yeah.
And that's the number one thing that we look at is, okay, we know that you can push the buttons. We know that you can send the emails. You can do all of the tasks. But ultimately, are you going to fit our culture?
Mm-hmm.
And so I haven't had anyone respond with physical touch until Tom. So thanks, Tom. We're probably not going to hire you. It's not really the role we're looking for. But it's having those sort of personal, but not over the line questions.
Yeah.
Getting someone to reveal themselves. When I say the art of recruiting has been lost, it has absolutely been lost in the mortgage industry, and we are desperate for good recruiting services. People do not take the time to get to know us. And as a top producer, I actually now get to the point I answer every phone call and I tell people, no, thank you. I started my own company. Please take me off your list, but I'm flattered. Before I used to just be like, delete, spam, no, or just respond with some, a little bit of venom, like, can't you do better than that? Don't you know who I am? So some things have changed in the way that I respond, but the recruiting has not changed. And I feel like any industry, right, there's got to be that level of personal touch if you want someone to respond, especially if you are looking for a high level employee, general manager, CEO, top producer in sales, is take the time to really get to know them. So maybe you do want to get into the mortgage industry side of recruiting.
Maybe.
Quietly and look into Tom's
There's
eyes.
some opportunity. Yeah.
There's definitely some opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, when you say they're not even personal, it's the fact that somebody's recruiting you. They're recruiting you because you're a top producer, but they're offering you a loan officer job, and his title is CEO of a company. Like had they looked up your LinkedIn, had done any homework, you're not going to take a loan officer job at this moment. And so to say, hey, we have a great opportunity for you to work for a company as a loan officer. And but what they did is they saw your numbers as a loan officer, and they say, oh gosh, he's great. Therefore, we want to hire him. So, I mean, just a little bit of background. And if you're doing, mass recruiting, then it would be hard to go look at everybody's information. But it's crazy that when you start they start calling you by name, and now they're texting you and they're calling you and they're emailing you. They didn't actually look up your title, and that maybe you were an owner of the company, and so you'd have to sell your company to go back to being a loan officer. Anyway, long story short, that personal
a big mistake to not look. Tom has been working on a position for a construction company. He has filled 3 of this particular role, but he's looked at 3,600 candidates, and he's looked closely. He has researched them. He's looked in some cases at their social media. He's gotten their phone numbers, their email addresses, always referencing their LinkedIn profile. So it doesn't matter if you're looking at a ton of people or 5, you shouldn't actively try to recruit someone that you don't know something about.
Right.
And what you all are speaking to is kind of this balance you have to strike, where we do have to do volume. I mean, that search that Amanda referenced, I think I contacted like 800 of those people, LinkedIn messages, cold emails, cold calls, the whole 9 yards. And so you have to, it's hard to scale 800 messages and make them all personalized. But what you can do is, have a more broad message initially. And as you get your no's or maybes coming in, that pool of remaining folks shrinks. And then you have more bandwidth to use with those remaining candidates. And the ones that, look really good that you haven't got a hold of yet, then you can start to deep dive more and make those messages more personalized. And in the case of folks like reaching out to a CEO about a loan officer job, at the very least, I would want to acknowledge like, hey, I know that this is kind of different for you. Sometimes people get tired of running their whole business and they want to just go back to being an individual contributor. I know this is a long shot. Do you have any interest? Acknowledging.
I would answer
that.
that.
We would answer that. Yeah,
that
would make sense.
I would answer that question because I am burnt out on running a company, and I'd love to come work for you, Tom.
Boom. There we go.
You guys, thank you so much for being on. This has been a lot of fun. I have learned a lot about recruiting and entrepreneurship and some of the similarities between our 2 industries. So thank you again so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Recruiting affects every business. Doesn't matter if you've got 5 employees or 500, because if you don't have great people, none of the other stuff matters. This has been the Boss's Office, because it's lonely at the top.